Imagine a chessboard, but not the kind you'd find in a quiet room or a friendly tournament. Picture it looming in the shadows, where every move is a matter of life and death, and the stakes are entire nations. Here, the pieces aren't just knights and pawns. They're armies, militias and rebel groups, each one representing thousands of lives and the hopes or fears of entire populations. And the board itself? It's not made of wood or marble, but of cities in chaos, nations torn apart, and landscapes scarred by conflict. The real players aren't generals on the ground. Instead, they're foreign officials and strategists, sitting thousands of miles away, orchestrating moves from behind secure screens and locked doors. These distant hands send weapons, funnel money, and offer secret support, quietly shaping the fate of entire regions without ever stepping onto the battlefield themselves. This is the reality of modern warfare. Shadow wars where the true architects remain hidden, their influence felt but their faces rarely seen. These aren't random acts of violence. They're calculated strategies designed to control vital regions, secure precious resources, or weaken rivals without direct confrontation. Civil wars on the surface may seem like internal struggles, but often they mask a deeper, more dangerous game being played by outside powers. To truly understand global power, you have to look beyond the headlines and see the hidden hands moving the pieces. Why do some conflicts seem endless, flaring up again and again, despite peace talks and international pressure? Why does peace remain so elusive, always just out of reach for those who need it most? The answers are buried in secret interventions, covert deals, and alliances forged in the dark. Let us pull back the curtain and reveal how powerful nations manipulate civil wars, turning local tragedies into global power plays. We'll explore the world of proxy warfare, where superpowers use smaller nations as pawns, sacrificing them for their own ambitions. This isn't just a story of politics or strategy. It's about real people, families and children caught in the relentless crossfire of ambition and power. The game is always being played, whether we see it or not. The question is, can you spot the players behind the moves? How do powerful countries secretly influence civil wars? The answer is a web of hidden motives and methods. Influence is rarely obvious. It's covert funding, training and propaganda, all designed to achieve goals without direct risk. To understand, we must ask, who's supplying the weapons? Who's shaping the narrative? These are the questions intelligence analysts ask every day. Get ready to think like one of them. Like and subscribe now. Before outsiders meddle, a nation must fracture from within. Civil war erupts when groups divided by region, ethnicity or ideology fight for control, tearing the country apart. The causes are deep: inequality, oppression, old grievances, or a single spark like a rigged election. Once violence starts, trust collapses, moderates vanish, and extremists take over. The chaos creates a power vacuum, an opening for foreign powers. A country at war is vulnerable, borders weaken, governments grow desperate, and resources become prizes. For outsiders, this is opportunity, not tragedy. They can install allies, access resources, or weaken rivals by fueling the conflict. The wounds of civil war become entry points for foreign influence. This is when the puppeteers step in, picking sides and pulling strings. The internal struggle becomes a stage for global ambitions. The nation's fate is no longer its own. The game has begun. Enter the proxy war, a conflict where major powers fight through local actors instead of direct confrontation. Superpowers provide money, weapons and intelligence. Proxies provide the soldiers. It's war by remote control, minimizing risk for the sponsors. Proxy wars have defined global conflict since the nuclear age, especially during the Cold War. Direct war between superpowers was unthinkable, so they fought through others. From Korea to Vietnam to Syria, local wars became global chess matches. For superpowers, the benefits are clear: weaken rivals, test weapons, expand influence, all with plausible deniability. For proxies, foreign support can mean survival, but at the cost of autonomy. The local struggle becomes a pawn in a larger game, prolonging violence and making peace elusive. The real cost is paid by the people on the ground. Proxy wars are efficient for the powerful, devastating for the weak. The cycle repeats: outside support, endless conflict, shattered nations. This is the art of fighting without fighting. Now, a true story from the Cold War. A single spy who changed the course of history. In the early 1960s, Oleg Penkovsky, a Soviet intelligence officer, grew disillusioned with his government. Fearing nuclear war, he secretly offered his services to the West. Penkovsky had access to the Kremlin's deepest secrets: missile specs, deployment plans, and Soviet weaknesses. He passed thousands of documents to the CIA and MI6, risking his life at every turn. His intelligence gave the West an unprecedented window into Soviet strategy. Penkovsky's reports reached President Kennedy, shaping US decisions at the highest level. But the KGB was closing in. Every meeting was a gamble with death. Penkovsky's courage showed that a single individual could alter the fate of nations. His story is a reminder: behind every grand strategy there are real people making impossible choices. Espionage isn't just fiction, it's a force that shapes history. Sometimes the fate of millions rests on one person's actions. Throughout modern history, countless nations have found themselves transformed into proxy battlegrounds, arenas where global powers wage their own wars by supporting local factions. These conflicts are rarely just about internal struggles. They become stages for international rivalries with devastating consequences for the people caught in the middle. The Korean War began as a civil conflict, but quickly escalated into a dramatic Cold War showdown. The Soviet Union and China threw their weight behind the North, while the United States and United Nations rallied to support the South. What started as a local dispute soon became a global crisis, with superpowers locked in a deadly contest for influence. Vietnam followed a similar path, North versus South, but with even more foreign hands pulling the strings. The US, China, and the Soviet Union all became deeply involved, turning Vietnam into a flashpoint of Cold War tensions and a testing ground for new strategies and weapons. The result? Decades of relentless bloodshed, deep divisions, and widespread devastation. Entire generations grew up knowing only conflict and loss. Fast forward to Syria, a civil uprising that spiraled into a complex proxy war. Russia and Iran backed the Assad regime, while the US and regional powers supported a patchwork of rebel groups. The conflict drew in foreign fighters, advanced weaponry, and competing interests, making peace ever more elusive. In every case, outside intervention only escalated the violence and prolonged the suffering. Civilians bore the brunt, forced to flee their homes or endure unimaginable hardship. The fate of these nations was often decided as much in distant foreign capitals as on their own soil. Decisions made in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran shaped the destinies of millions far away. Today, Korea remains divided. Vietnam was unified by force and Syria lies in ruins, each outcome a direct result of foreign intervention and proxy warfare. Proxy wars leave behind broken countries, shattered communities, and a legacy of instability that can last for decades. The pattern is unmistakable. Local conflicts become global games, and it is always ordinary people who pay the highest price, their lives forever changed by forces beyond their control. The lesson is clear. Proxy warfare remains a durable, devastating tool of statecraft, wielded by powerful nations with little regard for the human cost. The scars of these conflicts last for generations, shaping societies and haunting families long after the fighting ends. And so, the world keeps playing the same deadly game, again and again, with new players, but the same tragic results. Let's look closer at Korea, the blueprint for proxy wars. After World War II, Korea was split. Soviets in the north, Americans in the south. Both sides wanted unification on their terms, but the Cold War made the division permanent. When North Korea invaded the South, it was with Soviet and Chinese backing. The US intervened, using the UN for legitimacy. For the superpowers, Korea was a test of strength and ideology. For Koreans, it was devastation, millions dead, the land destroyed. The war ended in stalemate, but the peninsula remained a permanent proxy front. The template was set for future proxy wars. As the Korean War cemented the proxy model, the world saw how superpowers could clash indirectly, using other nations as battlegrounds for their ideologies. The Cold War was no longer just a contest of words or threats. It was a global chess match, with real lives at stake. In this shadowy world, Oleg Penkovsky's espionage reached its dramatic climax during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a moment that would define the era. In October 1962, the US discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. Suddenly, the threat of nuclear war was no longer abstract, but terrifyingly real and imminent. President Kennedy's advisors were split. Should they launch a military strike, risking all-out war, or attempt a risky negotiation? Penkovsky's intelligence was crucial. He revealed that the missiles in Cuba weren't yet operational, giving the US precious time to act. He also exposed that Khrushchev was bluffing, not seeking mutual destruction, but rather trying to gain leverage. Armed with this secret knowledge, Kennedy rejected calls for an immediate airstrike and instead chose a naval blockade, a bold but measured response. The world held its breath as Soviet ships steamed toward the blockade line, tension at its peak, until, at the last moment, the ships turned back, averting disaster. Behind closed doors, a secret deal was struck. The Soviets would withdraw their missiles from Cuba, ending the immediate threat. In return, the US pledged not to invade Cuba, a promise made quietly but with enormous consequences. And in a further secret concession, the US agreed to remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey, reducing the nuclear threat to the Soviet Union. Thanks to Penkovsky's information, Kennedy was able to steer the world away from catastrophe and toward a fragile peace. But Penkovsky paid the ultimate price for his courage. Arrested by the KGB, he was interrogated, tried, and ultimately executed for his actions. His sacrifice revealed how a single spy, operating in the shadows, could tip the balance in a global standoff and change the course of history. Espionage and proxy wars were deeply intertwined, both shaping the fate of nations from the shadows, often with consequences felt for generations. The Cold War's deadliest moment was not resolved by armies, but by secret knowledge, courage, and the willingness to risk everything for peace. The world survived the crisis, but the great game of the Cold War continued, its outcome still uncertain. We've traveled from proxy battlefields to the secret world of spies. The lesson is clear. The biggest events in world politics are often shaped by hidden hands. Civil wars are rarely just internal, they're stages for global rivalries. The Korean War showed how local conflicts become superpower showdowns. Syria proves proxy wars are still with us, now more complex than ever. Outside support prolongs wars and blocks peace, leaving nations hollowed out. Oleg Penkovsky's story reminds us that individuals can change history, even in the shadows. Espionage and proxy warfare are not relics, they're ongoing realities. To understand global conflict, always ask, who benefits? Who supplies the weapons? Who funds the war? The world is a chessboard. Look for the players, not just the pieces. Hidden power plays shape our world, fueling wars and deciding destinies. As citizens, we must question, investigate, and seek the truth behind the headlines. The more we understand the past, the better we can face the future. Don't forget to like and subscribe now, and click on one of these videos.